The blizzard hit without warning, turning the Montana sky into a white hell that even the hardiest souls feared. Hayes Zimmerman pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders as he guided his horse through the knee-deep snow, cursing himself for staying too long at the lumber camp. February of 1878 was proving to be one of the worst winters in memory, and he should have known better than to risk the mountain pass this late in the afternoon. His ranch sat another 5 miles south, and the temperature was dropping fast. The wind howled through the pines, making his gelding nervous, ears flicking back and forth as they pushed through the storm. Hayes had survived worse, though barely, and he knew these mountains like the back of his hand. Still, the cold had a way of making even familiar territory feel foreign and hostile. That was when he saw it, a dark shape half buried in the snow beside an overturned wagon. At first he thought it was just debris, maybe a fallen branch or abandoned cargo, but something made him pull his horse to a stop. The shape was too still, too deliberate in its placement. Hayes dismounted, his boots crunching in the fresh powder, and moved closer. It was a woman. She lay curled on her side, her lips blue, her clothing thin and entirely inadequate for the storm. Her dark hair was matted with ice, and her skin had taken on that waxy quality that meant hypothermia had already set in. Hayes dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off his glove to check for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady, a small miracle given how long she must have been exposed. "Madam," he said, shaking her shoulder gently, "can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of amber, though they were unfocused and glassy. Her lips moved, and he had to lean close to hear the words that came out in barely a whisper. "I will earn my keep," she said, the words slurred and confused. "Whatever you need, I will work, I promise." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in his arms. Hayes did not waste time trying to wake her again. He scooped her up, surprised at how little she weighed, and carried her to his horse. Getting her into the saddle while she was unconscious proved challenging, but he managed to position her in front of him, holding her against his chest as he remounted. The wagon she had been with was damaged beyond repair, one wheel completely shattered, the canvas top torn to shreds. There were no horses, no other people, nothing to indicate where she had come from or how long she had been stranded. The ride back to his ranch was the longest 5 miles of his life. He kept one arm wrapped around the woman, trying to share what little warmth he had while urging his horse to move faster through the storm. She did not stir, did not make a sound, and that terrified him more than anything. He had seen men freeze to death in the war, had watched the life drain out of them while their bodies shut down piece by piece. By the time his ranch came into view, full darkness had fallen, but the lights from his windows were like beacons in the storm. He had 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, good men who helped him run the cattle operation, and right now he needed their help desperately. "Marcus, Thomas," he shouted as he dismounted, still holding the woman. "I need hot water and blankets now." The door to the main house flew open and Marcus appeared, his gray beard crusted with snow from his earlier chores. His eyes widened when he saw the unconscious woman in Hayes' arms. "Sweet Jesus," Marcus breathed. "Where did you find her?" "Up on the pass." "Get the fire going in the spare room and bring those blankets." "Thomas, heat water on the stove. We need to get her warm slowly or we will kill her." Hayes carried her inside, grateful for the warmth that enveloped them. His house was modest but well built, designed to withstand the harsh Montana winters. He had 3 bedrooms, a luxury for a bachelor rancher, but right now he was glad for the space. He took her to the spare room, laying her on the bed as gently as possible. Her clothes were soaked through, and he knew they needed to come off. Hayes hesitated, aware of the impropriety but also aware that modesty meant nothing if she was dead. He called for Marcus. "I need you to help me. We have to get her out of these wet things." Together they worked quickly, removing her frozen dress and undergarments, wrapping her in dry blankets. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, her breathing shallow. Hayes had seen hypothermia before, knew the dangers of warming someone too quickly. They needed to be careful, methodical. Thomas appeared with kettles of warm water, and they filled the wash basin, using cloths to gently warm her extremities. Hayes worked on her hands and feet, while Marcus focused on getting more blankets from the linen closet. The woman's fingers were dangerously cold, and he feared frostbite had already set in. "Should we send for Doc Williams?" Thomas asked, hovering in the doorway. Hayes shook his head. "Not in this storm. The dock is in Moab, and that is a 20-mile ride. She will either make it through the night or she would not. We do what we can here." For the next several hours, Hayes stayed by her side, monitoring her breathing, checking her pulse, continuing the slow warming process. Marcus and Thomas helped for a while, but eventually he sent them back to the bunkhouse. This was his responsibility now. He had found her and he would see her through. Somewhere around midnight, her breathing seemed to strengthen, and some color returned to her cheeks. Hayes allowed himself a small measure of relief. He pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He studied her face in the lamplight, noting the sharp cheekbones, the delicate features. She was beautiful, even in her current state, though she looked half-starved. How long had she been wandering out there? And what had she meant about earning her keep? He dozed off sometime before dawn, his head resting on the edge of the bed. When he woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and the storm had passed. He sat up quickly, checking on his patient. Her breathing was steady, her color much improved. As he watched, her eyelids fluttered and those amber eyes opened again, clearer this time, more focused. She looked at him with confusion and fear, pulling the blankets up to her chin. "You are safe," Hayes said quickly, holding up his hands. "You are at my ranch. I found you yesterday in the storm. Do you remember?" She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "The wagon," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It broke. The horses ran. I tried to find shelter, but everything looked the same. What is your name?" "Olivia. Olivia Vaughn." "I am Hayes Zimmerman. This is my ranch about 15 miles south of Moab. How long were you out there?" Olivia closed her eyes and he saw tears leak from the corners. 2 days, maybe. I lost track. I was traveling with a merchant caravan, but they left me behind when I could not pay what I owed for the passage. They said I was dead weight. Her voice broke. "They took most of my belongings and left me with the broken wagon." Anger flared in Hayes' chest. He had heard of unscrupulous merchants taking advantage of desperate travelers, but to abandon someone in the mountains during winter was as good as murder. "Well, you are here now, and you are alive. That is what matters." "I meant what I said," Olivia said, opening her eyes to meet his. "I will earn my keep. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I am not afraid of hard work. I will not be a burden. Right now, you need to rest and recover. We can talk about the rest later." But she shook her head, trying to sit up despite her obvious weakness. "You do not understand. I have nothing. No money, no family, nowhere to go. If you turn me out, I will die. So please let me work for you. I will do whatever you need." Hayes gently pressed her back against the pillows. "Miss Vaughn, you nearly died last night. You are in no condition to work. I'm not going to turn you out. Just rest, get your strength back, and then we will figure things out." "All right." She searched his face, looking for deception, but apparently found none. She nodded slowly, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my life." He stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the emotion in the room. I will bring you some broth. You need to eat something, but we should start slow. In the kitchen, Hayes found Marcus already at work making breakfast. The older man looked up as Hayes entered, a knowing look in his eyes. She wake up. Yes, her name is Olivia Vaughn. She was abandoned by a merchant caravan after her wagon broke down. Marcus shook his head in disgust. There is a special place in hell for men like that. How is she doing? Weak, scared, but I think she will recover. She is worried about being a burden. Well, the house could use a woman's touch, Marcus said thoughtfully. No offense, boss, but your cooking is terrible and I have seen cleaner pig pens than your bedroom. Hayes could not help but smile. I will keep that in mind. Can you make some chicken broth, something gentle for her stomach? Over the next week, Olivia slowly recovered. Hayes moved her to his own bedroom, which was larger and had better light, while he took the spare room. He found himself checking on her constantly, bringing her meals, sitting with her in the evenings. She told him her story in pieces, how she had been living in St. Louis with her aunt after her parents died, how her aunt had remarried, and the new husband had not wanted her around. She had decided to head west, hoping to find work as a teacher or governess, but her money had run out faster than expected. I was foolish, she said one evening as they sat by the fire. She was strong enough now to move around the house, though Hayes insisted she take it easy. I thought I could make it on my own, but I was not prepared for how hard it would be. You survived, Hayes pointed out. That takes strength. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. I suppose it does, but I would not have survived without you. Hayes found himself drawn to her in ways he had not expected. She was intelligent and quick-witted, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. Despite everything she had been through, she had not lost her spirit. And she was beautiful, though he tried not to think about that too much. As she grew stronger, Olivia insisted on helping around the house. Hayes protested at first, but she was stubborn, and he eventually gave in. She proved to be an excellent cook, far better than any of them, and the house began to feel more like a home than it had in years. Marcus and Thomas were both charmed by her, treating her with respectful courtesy. 1 month after he found her, Hayes realized he was in trouble. He was falling in love with Olivia Vaughn, and he had no idea what to do about it. The problem was complicated. She was a guest in his home, dependent on his charity. Any advance he made could be seen as taking advantage of her vulnerable position. He would never forgive himself if she felt obligated to return his feelings out of gratitude or fear of being turned out. So he kept his distance, tried to maintain appropriate boundaries, even as his heart ached every time she smiled at him. Olivia seemed unaware of his internal struggle. She settled into life on the ranch with surprising ease, and as winter began to give way to early spring, she started talking about finding work in Moab. There is a new school opening, she said one morning over breakfast. They are looking for a teacher. I thought I might apply. Hayes felt his chest tighten. You want to leave? She looked surprised by the question. Well, I cannot stay here forever. You have been more than generous, but I need to make my own way. You are happy here, are you not? The words came out before he could stop them. Of course I am. You have all been so kind. But Hayes, I cannot impose on your hospitality indefinitely. People are already talking. That was true. On their occasional trips to Moab for supplies, Hayes had noticed the looks, heard the whispers. A single woman living with a bachelor rancher. It was scandalous, never mind the circumstances. Let them talk, he said roughly. I do not care what people think. But I do, Olivia said softly. I care about your reputation. You saved my life. The last thing I want is to cause you trouble. Marcus, who had been quietly eating his eggs, cleared his throat. If you will excuse me, I have work to do. He left the kitchen, giving them privacy. Hayes stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the snow was melting, revealing brown grass and muddy earth. Spring roundup would start soon, the busiest time of year on the ranch. The thought of Olivia not being here, of coming home to an empty house again, filled him with dread. "What if there was another option?" he said, not looking at her. "What do you mean?" He turned to face her, his heart pounding. "What if you stayed here, not as a guest or a housekeeper, but as my wife?" Olivia's eyes went wide. "Hayes, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Olivia. I tried not to. I know you are grateful to me for helping you, and I do not want you to feel obligated. But I cannot let you leave without telling you how I feel. These past weeks with you here, they have been the happiest of my life. I love talking to you, listening to you laugh, watching you move around the house like you belong here, because you do belong here, with me." She stood slowly, her hand pressed to her chest. "You love me." "Yes. I know I am just a rancher and I cannot offer you fancy things or a life in the city. But I can offer you a home, security, and all the love I have, if you will have me." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling. "Just a rancher. Hayes, you are the best man I have ever known. You are kind and honorable and strong. When you found me in the snow, you did not think twice about helping me. You brought me into your home, cared for me, asked nothing in return. How could I not fall in love with you?" Hope flared in his chest. "You love me. Of course I do. I have for weeks now. But I was afraid to say anything because I thought you were just being kind. I thought once I was well, you would want me to leave." Hayes crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. "I never want you to leave. Marry me, Olivia. Make this your home. Make me the happiest man in Montana." "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. She fit against him perfectly, like she was made to be there. When she tilted her face up to his, he did not hesitate. He kissed her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was everything he had imagined and more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Olivia was blushing. "I have never been kissed like that before," she admitted. "Good," Hayes said, grinning, "because I plan to kiss you like that every day for the rest of our lives." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Moab. Marcus and Thomas stood as witnesses, along with a few of Hayes' friends from town. Olivia wore a simple white dress that one of the local women had helped her make, and Hayes wore his best suit, the one he usually reserved for funerals. The ceremony was short but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Hayes kissed his bride with enthusiasm that made the small congregation chuckle. Olivia blushed furiously, but kissed him back just as enthusiastically. The celebration afterward was modest, just a meal at the hotel restaurant, but it felt perfect. Hayes could not stop smiling, could not stop looking at his wife. His wife. The word still felt surreal. That night they returned to the ranch as husband and wife. Hayes had prepared the master bedroom, changing the sheets and filling it with wildflowers that Marcus had helped him find. When Olivia saw it, she burst into tears. "Happy tears," she assured him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Everything is just so perfect. I keep thinking I will wake up and find this was all a dream." "It is real," Hayes said, kissing her forehead. "You are mine and I am yours. Nothing will ever change that." Their wedding night was tender and sweet. Hayes was gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt loved and cherished. Olivia was shy at first but grew more confident as the night went on. By the time they finally fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Hayes knew beyond a doubt that he had made the right choice. Life on the ranch took on a new rhythm after the wedding. Olivia threw herself into making the house a home, adding curtains and rugs, planting a garden as soon as the ground thawed enough. She started baking bread that was so good Marcus claimed he would never eat anyone else's again. She also proved to be surprisingly good with the horses, spending hours in the stables getting to know each animal. Hayes found himself falling more in love with her every day. She was full of surprises, this woman he had found in the snow. She could shoot a rifle with surprising accuracy, having learned from her father as a child. She could also play the piano, though they did not have one at the ranch. She read voraciously, anything she could get her hands on, and loved discussing the books with Hayes in the evenings. The physical side of their marriage continued to deepen as well. Hayes could not get enough of his wife, and she seemed to feel the same way. They made love with passionate frequency, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure. Olivia bloomed under his attention, becoming more confident and assured. Summer arrived, bringing with it long days and hard work. The ranch was doing well, the cattle healthy and multiplying. Hayes hired 2 more hands to help with the workload, and the operation expanded. He was making good money, enough to start thinking about improvements. "What would you think about expanding the house?" he asked Olivia one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Maybe adding another bedroom or 2, a proper parlor." Olivia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "That sounds wonderful, though we might need those extra bedrooms sooner than you think." It took a moment for her words to register. When they did, Hayes sat up straight, looking at her with wide eyes. "Olivia, are you saying what I think you are saying?" she smiled, that radiant smile that made his heart skip. "I am with child, Hayes. We are going to have a baby." Joy exploded in his chest, so intense it almost hurt. He pulled her into his lap, kissing her thoroughly, then pulling back to look at her face. "When? How long have you known?" "I suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I told you. I am about 3 months along, I think. The baby should arrive in late January or early February." Hayes did the math in his head. She had gotten pregnant shortly after their wedding. The thought of becoming a father filled him with a mixture of excitement and terror. "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "Happy? Olivia, I am beyond happy. You have given me everything. A home, a wife, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." She relaxed against him, sighing contentedly. "I was a little nervous to tell you. I know we have not been married that long enough," Hayes said firmly. "I cannot wait to meet our baby." "Do you hope for a boy or a girl?" "I do not care, as long as the baby is healthy. Though I think you would make a wonderful father to either." The next months passed in a blur of preparation. Hayes worked with a carpenter from Moab to add 2 new bedrooms to the house, along with a proper nursery. Olivia sewed baby clothes and blankets, her excitement growing as her belly expanded. She remained healthy throughout the pregnancy, though she got tired more easily toward the end. Hayes found himself becoming protective to an almost ridiculous degree. He would not let her lift anything heavy, barely let her out of his sight. Olivia tolerated his hovering with good humor, though she occasionally had to remind him that she was pregnant, not dying. "Women have been having babies for thousands of years," she said one evening when he tried to stop her from cooking dinner. "I am perfectly capable of making a pot of stew." "I know, I just worry," she softened, taking his hand and placing it on her swollen belly. "Feel that? Your son or daughter is strong and healthy. Everything is going to be fine." As if in response, the baby kicked against his palm. Hayes felt tears prick his eyes. His child. His and Olivia's child growing inside her, a miracle made real. Winter arrived again, bringing memories of the night he had found Olivia. As her due date approached, Hayes made sure they were well stocked with supplies. He sent for Doc Williams from Moab, asking him to stay at the ranch for the last few weeks of Olivia's pregnancy. The doctor agreed, setting up in one of the new bedrooms. Olivia went into labor on a snowy February night, almost exactly 1 year after Hayes had found her. The contractions started around dinner time, and by midnight they were coming hard and fast. Hayes stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, feeling utterly helpless as she suffered through each wave of pain. "You are doing so well," he kept saying. "Just a little longer, my love, just a little longer." "Easy for you to say," she gasped between contractions, but she squeezed his hand and tried to smile. Doc Williams remained calm and encouraging throughout, and just before dawn, after hours of labor, their son was born. The baby let out a lusty cry that filled the room, and Hayes felt his heart expand to accommodate this new love. "It is a boy," Doc Williams announced, cleaning the baby and wrapping him in a blanket. "A fine, healthy boy." He placed the infant in Olivia's arms, and Hayes moved to sit beside her on the bed, wrapping his arm around both of them. The baby had stopped crying, his eyes trying to focus on his mother's face. He had a shock of dark hair and tiny, perfect features. "He is beautiful," Hayes whispered, touching the baby's soft cheek. "Just like his mother." "He has your nose," Olivia said, her voice exhausted but happy. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Hayes knew exactly what felt right. "How about Henry, after my father?" "Henry Zimmerman," Olivia tested the name. "I love it. Hello, Henry. Welcome to the world, little one." The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting but wonderful. Henry was a good baby, though he kept them up most nights with his feeding schedule. Hayes helped as much as he could, changing diapers, walking the floor with his son when he fussed, marveling at the tiny person they had created. Watching Olivia with their son filled Hayes with indescribable emotion. She was a natural mother, patient and loving, even when exhausted. She sang to Henry, told him stories, gazed at him with such adoration that Hayes sometimes felt like an intruder on a private moment. But then she would look up and smile at Hayes, and he would know that he was part of this too. They were a family now, complete and whole. As winter gave way to spring again, Henry grew and changed. He started smiling, then laughing, his personality emerging more each day. He was a happy baby, curious about everything, reaching for objects with his chubby hands. Life on the ranch continued to flourish. Hayes' herd had grown significantly, and he was now one of the more successful ranchers in the area. He hired more help, allowing him to spend more time with his family. Marcus and Thomas had both become like uncles to Henry, spoiling him shamelessly. When Henry was about 6 months old, Olivia came to Hayes with a proposition. "I have been thinking," she said one evening after they had put the baby to bed. "There are a lot of children in this area who do not have access to education. What would you think about me starting a small school here on the ranch?" Hayes considered the idea. "You want to teach again?" "Not full-time, just a few hours a day. We have the space now with the addition. I could use one of the spare rooms. I miss teaching, and I think I could make a difference for these children." "If that is what you want, then I support you completely. How many children are we talking about?" "Maybe a dozen to start. The families around here do not have much money, so I would not charge much, just enough to cover supplies." The school started that fall, with 11 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Olivia threw herself into teaching with the same passion she brought to everything. Hayes loved watching her with the children, seeing her light up as she explained arithmetic or helped a struggling reader. The school became part of the rhythm of their lives. In the mornings, Olivia taught while Hayes worked the ranch. In the afternoons, they were parents to Henry, who was now walking and getting into everything. In the evenings, they were husband and wife, still as passionate about each other as they had been in the beginning. 2 years after Henry was born, Olivia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Hannah. She had her mother's amber eyes and her father's determined chin. Where Henry had been an easy baby, Hannah was more challenging, fussier, and more demanding. But she also had a sweetness to her that melted Hayes' heart. Being a father to 2 young children while running a ranch was exhausting, but Hayes had never been happier. His family was everything to him. Olivia, Henry, Hannah, they were the reason he worked so hard, the reason he pushed himself. The years passed in a blur of birthdays and holidays, first steps and first words, skinned knees and childhood illnesses. Henry grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved animals and dreamed of being a rancher like his father. Hannah was wild and fearless, always climbing trees or racing her horse, giving her parents heart attacks on a regular basis. When Henry was 8 and Hannah was 6, Olivia surprised Hayes with news of another pregnancy. This time, she gave birth to twin boys, James and Joseph. The house became even more chaotic, but also more full of love and laughter. Through it all, Hayes and Olivia's love for each other only deepened. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when they could, talking late into the night after the children were asleep. The passion between them had evolved but never faded. Hayes still looked at his wife and felt his heart skip, still counted himself blessed every single day. "You ever think about that night in the snow?" Olivia asked him one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were all in bed, giving them rare, quiet time alone. "Which night?" Hayes teased, though he knew exactly what she meant. "The night you found me. The night that changed everything. I think about it often. I think about how close I came to riding past you, to missing you entirely. What if the storm had been worse? What if I had taken a different route? We would never have met." Olivia leaned against him. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. We were meant to be together." "You think so?" "I know so. From the moment I opened my eyes and saw you, even though I was half frozen and terrified, I felt safe. I felt like I had finally come home." Hayes kissed the top of her head. "You are my home, Olivia. You and the children. Everything good in my life started the night I found you." "I was so scared that day," she admitted. "I thought I was going to die alone in the snow. When those merchants left me, I truly believed my life was over. I had nothing, no one. I remember lying there as the snow fell, thinking this was it. This was how my story would end. But it was not the end. It was just the beginning. Yes, the beginning of the most wonderful life I could have imagined. I wanted to earn my keep, remember? I was so worried about being a burden." Hayes laughed. "You said that right before you fainted. I had no idea what you meant at the time. I was desperate. I would have done anything to survive. But you never made me feel like I owed you anything. You just cared for me because it was the right thing to do. I cared for you because I could not do otherwise. And then I fell in love with you because you are extraordinary." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. After 18 years of marriage, they could communicate without words, could sense each other's moods and thoughts. "The children are growing up so fast," Olivia said eventually. "Henry will be a man soon. It will not be long before he is thinking about marriage and starting his own family." "Do not remind me. I am not ready to be old," she laughed. "You are not old. You are distinguished. Distinguished is just another word for old." "Fine, then we are both old. But we are old together, and that is what matters." Hayes pulled her closer, grateful for this moment, this life, this woman. He had thought he was content before Olivia, had believed his life was full enough with just the ranch and his work. But she had shown him what he was missing, had filled spaces in his heart he had not even known were empty. The ranch continued to prosper over the years. Hayes expanded the operation, buying more land, increasing the herd. He became known throughout Montana as a fair and honest businessman, someone whose word meant something. Olivia's school grew as well, eventually moving to a dedicated building in Moab, though she continued to teach. Henry did indeed grow into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's kindness and intelligence. At 20, he married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, a sweet girl named Sarah who fit into the family perfectly. They settled on a portion of Hayes' land, starting their own cattle operation with Hayes' help. Hannah, true to her wild nature, refused several marriage proposals before finally falling in love with a horse trainer who could match her spirit. They married when she was 22 and moved to Colorado, where they started a breeding program for working horses. The twins, James and Joseph, were as different as night and day despite being identical in appearance. James was quiet and studious, eventually becoming a lawyer in Helena. Joseph was adventurous and restless, joining the cavalry for a few years before settling down back in Moab. Through all the changes, all the years, Hayes and Olivia remained the constant center of their growing family. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, mourned losses, and welcomed grandchildren. Their love became legendary in the area, the story of the cowboy who found his wife in a snowstorm and loved her for the rest of his life. On their 30th anniversary, Hayes planned a special surprise. He took Olivia back to the mountain pass where he had found her, the place where their story began. It was summer now, the pass green and beautiful, completely transformed from that winter night so long ago. "I wanted to bring you here," Hayes said as they stood looking at the view, "to remind us both of how far we have come." Olivia looked around, tears in her eyes. "I can barely remember what it looked like that night. I was so cold, so afraid. I thought my life was ending in this place. Instead, it was beginning. Our life was beginning." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Hayes Zimmerman, you have given me 30 years of happiness. You have loved me, supported me, built a life with me. You gave me a home when I had nothing, a family when I was alone. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "I feel the same way," Hayes said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are everything to me, Olivia. You always have been, from that first moment I saw you in the snow. Even though you were unconscious and half frozen, I knew you were special. I knew you were going to change my life." They kissed there on the mountain pass, surrounded by wildflowers and sunshine, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. Hayes and Olivia grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down. But their love remained as strong as ever, a constant in a changing world. Hayes eventually handed over the main operation of the ranch to Henry, though he still helped out when he could. He and Olivia spent their days in the house they had built together, surrounded by family and memories. Every evening they still sat on the porch watching the sunset, talking about their day, their children, their life. When Hayes was 72, he fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor did his best, but Hayes' body, weakened by decades of hard work and harsh winters, could not fight it off. He spent his last days in bed with Olivia by his side. "I am not afraid," he told her, holding her hand. "I have lived a full life, a happy life. The only hard part is leaving you." "You are not leaving me," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "You will always be with me. In my heart, in our children, in everything we built together." "Promise me you will be happy," Hayes said. "Promise me you will keep living, keep loving." I promise. But Hayes, you have to promise me something too. When my time comes, when I join you, you have to be waiting for me. Promise me we will find each other again, just like we found each other in the snow all those years ago. I promise, Hayes said, smiling through his pain. I will always find you, my love. In this life or the next, I will always find you. He died peacefully that night, with Olivia holding his hand and their children gathered around. The loss was profound, but the legacy he left behind was rich and deep. He had been a good man, a loving husband, a devoted father. He had built something lasting, not just in land and cattle, but in the family he had created. Olivia lived for another 8 years, remaining active and engaged until the very end. She continued teaching, continued being the heart of her family, but those who knew her best could see the change. Part of her heart had gone with Hayes, and she was simply waiting until she could join him again. When she finally passed, peacefully in her sleep at 80 years old, her children honored both their parents with a joint memorial service. They were buried side by side on the ranch, overlooking the mountains where their story had begun. Their descendants, dozens strong by now, continued to thrive in Montana. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations. Olivia's school became a permanent institution in Moab, educating hundreds of children over the decades. Their love story became part of local legend, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. Henry, now an old man himself, sometimes took his own grandchildren to the mountain pass, telling them the story of how their great-grandfather had found their great-grandmother in a snowstorm, half frozen and near death. How he had saved her life, and in doing so had found his own salvation. How she had whispered that she would earn her keep before fainting, and how instead she had given him everything he never knew he needed. That is why family is so important, Henry would tell them. That is why we take care of each other, help each other. Because you never know when saving one person might change everything. Your great-grandfather could have ridden past that day. He could have decided it was too dangerous to stop, but he did not. He chose kindness, chose compassion, and it gave him the greatest gift of his life. The story lived on, passed down through the generations, a testament to the power of love and the miracle of two people finding each other against all odds. The ranch remained prosperous, the family remained close, and the memory of Hayes and Olivia remained alive in every sunset watched from the porch, every meal shared around the table, every act of kindness shown to a stranger in need. Years turned into decades, and the world changed around them. The Wild West became less wild, towns grew into cities, cars replaced horses. But the Zimmerman family held onto their roots, held onto the values that Hayes and Olivia had instilled. Hard work, honesty, compassion, love. These were the things that mattered, the things that lasted. The house where Hayes and Olivia had lived remained standing, carefully maintained by each generation. The bedroom where they had shared 30 years of marriage, where their children had been born, where Hayes had died, was preserved as a reminder. The porch where they had watched thousands of sunsets together became a gathering place for family celebrations. On the wall in the main room hung a painting, commissioned by Henry after his mother's death. It showed Hayes on horseback, holding Olivia in his arms, riding through the snow. Her eyes were closed, her head resting against his chest, and his face was determined, focused on getting her to safety. Beneath the painting was a small plaque that read, "Love Finds a Way, February 1878. The painting became the centerpiece of family gatherings, a visual reminder of where they all came from. Children grew up knowing the story. understanding that their very existence was the result of one man's decision to stop in a snowstorm, to help a stranger, to open his heart. The land that Hayes had worked so hard to build up remained in the family for over 100 years. Each generation added their own chapter to the story, their own contributions to the legacy. But they never forgot the foundation, the love story that had started it all. When Montana celebrated its centennial, the Zimmerman family was honored for their contributions to the state's development. The ranch was recognized as one of the oldest continuously operating family ranches in the region. During the ceremony, one of Hayes and Olivia's great-great-granddaughters read a letter that Olivia had written to Hayes on their 25th anniversary, which had been carefully preserved. "My dearest Hayes," the letter began, "25 years ago today, you made me the happiest woman alive by agreeing to be my husband. But our story began even before that, on a night that could have ended in tragedy but instead became the greatest blessing of my life. When I think of how close I came to dying in that snow, how easily we could have missed each other, it makes me cherish every moment we have had together even more. You saved my life that night, but you have continued to save me every day since. You have loved me through my fears, supported my dreams, given me a family I never thought I would have. You took a starving, freezing woman who had nothing and gave her everything. I love you more than words can express, more than actions can show. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Forever yours, Olivia." There was not a dry eye in the audience when the reading finished. The love between Hayes and Olivia transcended time, touching hearts generations later. As the sun set on that centennial celebration, the family gathered at the ranch, just as they had done countless times before. They stood on the porch that Hayes had built, looking at the mountains that had witnessed the beginning of their family's story. Someone suggested a toast, and glasses were raised. "To Hayes and Olivia," one of the great-grandchildren said, "who proved that love can bloom even in the coldest winter and that kindness can change everything." "To Hayes and Olivia," the family echoed, their voices carrying across the land that had been shaped by two people who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. The ranch continued on, a living testament to their love. The mountains stood eternal, keeping their secrets, remembering that winter night when one man had found one woman and changed both their destinies. The snow fell each winter, covering the same ground where Olivia had nearly died, but now it was just part of the cycle, part of the story. In the end, the legacy of Hayes and Olivia Zimmerman was not measured in acres or cattle or buildings. It was measured in love, in family, in the ripple effects of one act of kindness on a winter night. It was measured in the children who learned compassion from their story, in the marriages that were strengthened by their example, in the belief that true love not only exists, but can endure anything. Their story became more than just family history. It became a reminder that the choices we make matter, that stopping to help someone can change the world, that love found in the most unlikely circumstances can be the strongest love of all. It became a promise that even in the darkest, coldest moments, there is hope. There is always hope. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Hayes and Olivia Zimmerman were together again, watching over the family they had created, the legacy they had built, the love they had shared. Their story had ended, but it had never truly finished. It lived on in every generation, in every telling, in every heart that believed in the power of love. The Wild West had been tamed, the frontier had been settled, but the story of the cowboy who found a starving woman in the snow and loved her for the rest of his life remained untamed, unsettled, as wild and beautiful as the mountains where it all began. And that story, that love, would continue as long as there were people to tell it, to remember it, to believe in it. That was the true happy ending. Not just that Hayes and Olivia had found each other, had loved each other, had built a life together, but that their love had become something bigger than themselves, something that would outlast them, something that would continue to inspire and give hope long after they were gone. In the end, love always wins, always endures, always finds a way, and that was the greatest legacy of all.